But to like move into DC TV, we definitely have to talk about Superman and Lois, episode 6 of the third season, which for me, it's my least favorite.
I understand that. I feel like there was a lot going on here, but also not a lot going on here. I don't know if that makes sense, but I know we credited Superman and Lois early on in its run for there having a lot of emotional movement, even though a lot didn't happen in the story. Whereas this time, not a lot happened in the story, and there was some emotional movement, but I'm not sure, with the exception of the big twist at the end, it got the story that much further. Clark and Lois aside, because their story's always moving.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on in this. What was it you struggled with this week? And I feel like I might know some of these answers already.
It is always Sarah and the Cushings. Um, and it's not like I'm not a person who wants less Cushing in the show. I actually do enjoy what they're trying to do with their family drama. It's just some of the things like so. This whole arc for them was no one's paying attention to baby Sophie, and all that baby wants is some attention,
And this
and
has
no
been
one's
on my
giving it.
mind for weeks because she hasn't been in any of the episodes, and I almost brought it up. I was like, "Didn't Lana have a second child? Where's Sarah's sister? Like, where did she go? Like." And then it popped up, and I'm like, "Oh, thank you for answering my question." And I didn't ask the universe. I, we've seen, at least I have seen this story play out where like older siblings tasked with babysitting the younger sibling runs away, older sibling loses track of younger sibling, and we all learn something about ourselves. Like I've seen this in so many sitcoms, movies, and that's not even my problem with it. Like I don't care. I think it's a good story. I think it's worth telling in any kind if it fits what story you're telling, and I think it fit here. But did Sarah learn anything that she's going to carry on with her to next week? That's
No.
my question, because when she finally does find Sophie, she's like, "Oh, you scared me." And I'm like, that doesn't connect with me. I feel like you wouldn't have cared that much.
Yeah.
I feel like they amped that up a little bit because she could give a crap about helping her sister make lunch or dinner or whatever it was. She was like, "I don't know, open the fridge." And her sister's like, "I'm way too young for this mess." And I'm on her team. But like when they find her at the where they find her football field
Where the
somewhere.
fairgrounds would be if
Yeah.
they were actually in town. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. And Sarah was like, "Oh," she hugged her and was like, "I was so worried." And I'm like, "You were not."
uh, no lies were told. Yeah, I agree. Totally, 100%. That was my issue with it as well. No arguments from me. I feel like Sarah has been at the heart of a lot of storylines. We said we were looking forward to seeing the Sarah moving on from Jordan era. And I feel like every single time they've placed her in a different environment that just causes as much conflict as the Jordan and Sarah situation did. They're just all different ones now. This week it was her family dynamic with Sophie. I do appreciate that the show went meta and actually addressed the whole "where's Sophie" situation because fans have been asking that for about 3 years. But yeah, I didn't love how it went down because I feel like there's tension between. I knew they were going to have Lana find out about Kyle and Chrissy in this episode because they've been playing with it for weeks, but it's only become a conversation in this episode. And I feel like they were playing in the marital drama so much that that's what where Sophie had to become about, that it totally absolved Sarah of any wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, absolutely, Kyle should have absolutely been keeping an eye on his daughter when she was in his house, but he didn't just pop out for groceries, but he could have popped out and trusted his teenage daughter and her friend to keep an eye on a child. But Sarah didn't do that because Sarah didn't care. And then because Lana wanted to argue with Kyle, logical thinking just went out the window. Like it rested with Sarah to do something because this wasn't an isolated incident. Sarah didn't want to spend time with her the day before that. And it's not even the fact that she couldn't spend time with her. It's about the fact she was moody and mean to her sister in the process. And she just had no time for her. And I don't mean that as in like counting down the minutes kind of time. She had no time of day for this little girl. And then suddenly it's all Kyle's fault. Kyle has responsibility in this, but I would have liked to Sarah took a little bit of responsibility at the end, but nobody made her feel that way. And that's an issue because for me, she should have been held accountable for her own actions and she kind of got away with that.
Yeah, that bothered me because I feel like it's not that you can't have a dynamic with siblings on TV where the older one just really doesn't have time for their younger sibling. It's more so that like we need to at least address it. Like this wouldn't have happened if we just made the baby a sandwich. Like it just and I think it's because also she had to study for a biology exam, and that's like really important, truly, but we couldn't have stopped 5 seconds to go get a burger.
She had an earbud in.
And
And she had one hanging out, and I'm like, you're listening to Dua Lipa and doing biology studying, but you can't make your sister lunchable. I don't know.
No,
I don't mean to dog on Sarah all the time, because I think it's just disappointing, more so that I want a little bit more from her, more better for her. The actress is wonderful. She gives it her all. I don't think they constantly give her, the character, the best material. And I told you guys about this line that truly sent me into the stratosphere, when she said, no matter how hard I try, I keep messing everything up. Bestie, where is the trying? Like, baby, is the trying in the room with us?
It's not. I really wish we got to see it though, because it would have been because she got paired up with John, who she never really gets paired up with on
that irritated me too, because at the end it became about Jordan being like a jealous puppy dog running after his brother, being like, you go to hang out with Sarah.
I know, but I love John for that moment though, because it was really petty. He only said that because his brother dogged on his shirt, and he was like, you know what, I got to hang out with Sarah, how about that? And just walks away. It was a great sibling
it was, and I feel like Jonathan was my favorite character in this episode, and I was like, everybody needs to leave Jonathan alone. Jordan was suddenly very mean for no reason. Kyle wouldn't just give him the respect to just give him a t-shirt without even any name on it. Like, fair enough if you need to earn your nickname, don't really get that, whatever, but like, he doesn't need to be known as something else. I feel like Jonathan was at the center of the family drama here, and that he helped solve the Cushing issues, and fair play to him, but it was set up from the get-go, and you could see he was going to have to prove himself, and I'm sorry, he did not need to prove himself in this situation. Yes, he did some really, really bad things last season, but we know he's not a bad person. I don't think saying the right words to Sophie meant that he should need to prove himself in the eyes of Kyle, who doesn't really know much about him in general. I felt like if someone has to earn your respect, you need to respect them as well. And I just feel like Kyle was being a little disrespectful to him. I'm sorry.
You know what's funny about that interaction though, where he talks about generations? Kyle is a millennial. So like, he's either like a Gen X millennial cusper, or he's like legit a millennial. So him being like, your generation just wants things, I was like, that's us. That's us, love. Like, you are either a cusper or a millennial, so I don't know why you're talking to a Gen Z like that, because it's the same thing. But it's just, I've never liked the gruff, you have to earn your place and earn your name, because I think it's just courtesy to call him by his actual name. I've never liked that. So like, a shirt that didn't have Rusty on the back would have been just fine. And he was doing everything he was supposed to be doing. It's interesting to see this journey for John, though. I like that he's trying to, figure out how he can be heroic, because it's what he wants to do. I also, I did like his comment to Sophie about how he feels left out in his family, because even with Lois being human, she's Lois freaking Lane. So like, even when his mom was like, we're the two humans, we got to stick together. He's like, yeah, but mom, you're like the world's best reporter. Like, it's not the same thing. I'm still trying to find myself. So I love that that they're trying to give weight to Jonathan's own heroic journey. Jordan's not doing that, but Jordan's not going to. But I do love that Lois is giving it weight. And I believe Clark is too. But Clark had a lot to do this episode emotionally, so he didn't exactly get to focus on Jonathan. He had to focus on Jordan and Lois.
Can we jump to the end of the episode, when Clark is finally like opening up to Lois, and Tyler has that big like monologue and he's crying? My favorite performance of the episode was just Bitsy reacting to that. Like, that would that's my favorite kind of acting, is when you're just watching somebody react and you can see that they are in it and they're feeling it. I was like, oh my God, Bitsy giving us everything. It was so good.
It was, and I feel like that was the perfect like emotional resolution to the story, because Clark's been on a journey this season, and it's only now that he's starting to talk about it. And I know you could kind of see the writing at hand when he was like, it's not for me or whatever, but I feel like that's something Clark Kent would do. He wants to save everyone, and he can't save people struggling with an illness, because it's a very real world thing. And that's something that I love, that line from Lois, that's something he'll never have to confront. unless it's kryptonite related, he'll never have to confront the idea of his own mortality or getting sick or having a cold or anything as simple as that, because he's not human. And I feel like that played really well into the storyline with Jonathan or Jordan as well, because what ultimately saved Jordan from the kryptonite bullet was his humanity, which is something again Clark doesn't have to deal with. So I feel like throughout the episode, he kind of had to see the, like, obviously the fragility of humans, but he also needed to see the beauty of humans, and that they're willing to fight because they're weaker than Superman, and that they don't lose every battle, but that he had to acknowledge the fear of loss in order to move on. And just Tyler and Bitsy, the whole when they were at loggerheads, Clark and Lois, and they wouldn't relent. Beautiful scenes, and I love the fact that it's built into the storyline with Jordan as well. And yeah, we'll get to how Jordan was infuriated, one of the more infuriating parts of the episode. But I mean, like, you did understand where he was coming from, because Clark was not confronting his problems and he was like ignoring them. So there was a lot of emotional, heavy movement in the episode, and I really appreciated all of that.
Speaking of Jordan, was this the first time, I can't remember, that he's worn his little Superboy goggles?
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of spoiled it for us at the start because he walked in and covered in mud and you still couldn't see it. And then at the end, we finally got to see him suited up.
I don't know why it made me laugh when he was passed out and he just had his little goggles on. Just made me laugh.
It's not the most Superboy outfit, but I mean, it's logical.
It was cute. It was funny to me.
It's the prototype.
It is. We'll have the big red S by the end of the season.
My favorite thing that they let Clark do on this show is be a husband. So I loved the support group that he was a part of, where he's like listening and he's like, people's stories. I hear you, until it got too hard. Like when the leader of the group was expressing like what it means for a strong person to have to let go. And like having to be the one to tell your spouse, you can let go. It's fine. You don't have to keep doing this for me. That is not something that Clark wanted to confront. Like, that's not like even a thing for him. What do you mean Lois Lane isn't going to make it through cancer? She's Lois Lane. I think what I love about Clark and Lois is that they're so equal that in his mind, like, yes, I'm Superman, but she is like my Superman. And you mean to tell me that like my superhero could possibly die? He can't confront it. And so I love that we were on schedule for that denial, because Lois got to go through her, I don't want to have to stop to handle this phase. And now he had to go through his toxic positivity phase, where she was like, this is not helpful. I know you think you're being helpful, but you're not being helpful, and we need to do these things. I also loved the moment in their room when she's trying to do end of life paperwork so that he knows how everything is going to be. And she's mad that she waited until she got ill, which is a common thing that people tend to have to go through, where I should have just done this when I was healthy. Now we got to do it when I'm not. And we're sad as we're doing it, rather than it just being a reality that we all know is going to happen. Now it's a reality that is like potentially knocking at my door. And he just did not want to contend with it. He didn't want to do wills. He didn't want to do anything like that. I was like, you need to do those things, because if she signs a, what is it? Do not resuscitate, DNR, you're going to be mad. like this is something that you need to have a conversation with now, instead of when she does the paperwork and you find out later that she signed that. I don't think Lois is going to do that, but it's stuff that comes up.
And it was very poignant and authentic like that, because Clark is Superman. So that conversation last week about how the pull on Lois, she might feel at some point, it haunted him. And it was, I thought that was really well done, because this week he was afraid to acknowledge any possibility of illness, and even the idea of Lois being prepared for an eventuality that that might not happen. We know on the show it won't, but really it's a realistic possibility for her. But just because she wasn't afraid to confront that didn't mean she was willing to give up. And I thought that was such an incredible dynamic. Like you said, Sabrina, Clark got to be a husband, but Lois got to be a wife, and her voice was heard, and she got to be a human, and she got to be a warrior and stand up for herself, because she needed to be heard in the situation. And we don't get an awful lot of conflict between Clark and Lois. And you say conflict, it never really raised the conflict stage, but like, it was powerful stuff. And I just wanted to appreciate the show for handling that really, really well, and in such an authentic manner.
Is this the most human story they've ever told for Superman?
I would say so.
I would argue that, yeah.
This is my only experience with Superman. It's like I I never imagined it would get like this real, like this like human, this like I imagined it would be like villains and kryptonite and larger than life stuff, but this is like we have a superhero dealing with real life, and it feels groundbreaking as someone who's never watched much superhero content.
I think it really is. I know when the storyline first came up, we could maybe see the beginnings of where they were going. We were like, would they actually do that? And I think a lot of people don't give the show credit because it's on a network like the CW. But like, yeah, you don't see this stuff. You rarely read about it in comic books, let alone see it played out on TV or in a movie. A Superman movie would never tell this kind of story. It wouldn't have the time to tell it in the way that Superman at Lois says. It really, the idea that this show is a family drama is giving it a second life, and it's allowing it to do stuff like this that your typical run-of-the-mill superhero show wouldn't be able to tell. And I think that's now a good point to bring up the twist at the end, where we find out that Lois's friend is actually Bruno Mannheim's wife. Never did I see that coming. And I feel like if this was on a show like The Flash or whatever, when a random character was introduced to pair off with maybe the second or the other lead, not in the main storyline, you'd see they were going somewhere with this. But Superman and Lois has such an authentic way of meandering around real world stories. You're just like, oh, this is a subplot. Oh, this doesn't need to add up to anything. In the same way that was it Candace's dad showed up a few weeks ago, and then they had a 2-episode arc, and we haven't seen that man since. I don't think that's going to lead to
honestly,
anything.
for the best.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I just figured this was going to be an important character plot for Lois, and it still is. But I didn't think that by the end of the episode we're going to say, oh, that's onomatopoeia. So, I mean, like, credit to Superman and Lois. It's continuing to break ground, as Reed said, and try new things and pull the wool over our eyes when we least expect it.
I know. I mean, she probably doesn't see it as a villain love story, but I do. One of the things that's going to be interesting, I think, with this reveal, as we move further into the season, is the juxtaposition and the parallels. I mean, you have two spouses in relationships where the wife is sick, and the husband would do anything to fix this. Granted, we haven't seen Clark be pushed to the limit. We'll see if that actually happens this season. But we're definitely seeing Bruno Mannheim be pushed to the limit, and he is willing to do anything, and so is Pia. Like, it will be what will be. If people die, they die, because they just both desperately want her to continue to hang on to life. And I think that's, for this to be a family drama, that works so excellently, that the villain's also not necessarily sympathetic, but you understand it. Like, there are times when I don't want to spoil The Last of Us, but there's the last episode of The Last of Us, Joel has to make a decision that is very controversial. And it's like one of those things, like, what would you do? How far would you go for the person that you love? And Bruno's like, I would burn the world down to the ground. And you're like, in some ways I respect it. In some, like, I don't want murder or anything, but I get it. I get how love can push you to the point of no return.
And I think that adds a huge amount of depth, because I'm pretty sure Bruno Mannheim is one of the more one-dimensional characters in the comics. He's just an associate of Lex Luthor who doesn't have that much to do. Of course, he's in charge of Intergang, but this adds a whole new level of it. We just thought Lois was investigating Intergang. We never realized that this man would have real depth and emotion and be considered a hero in his city, and now is, of course, has to contend with his wife possibly dying. So there's a whole lot of emotional stuff there to deal with. And I mean, this is the very same episode. I nearly started laughing when Superman flew into his office, and yet again Bruno was up opposite. Get out of my office! I was like, does this man have no more dialogue? But then by the end of the episode, you're like, oh, I see where we're going with this. And Bruno is definitely the villain of the piece, but he's not a villain in the original sense of the word, if you know what I mean. There's far more explanation and character development to it than that. And he's suddenly become the most interesting villain they've ever done yet. And I still don't think we know everything about him. So I can't wait to see where it goes next. What a reveal. And I feel like we're going to keep saying what a villain Bruno Mannheim is.
Can you believe we're almost like halfway through the season already?
No, I don't know what I mean. Like, we've done so much already. Where could we go next?
It feels like it just started.
I know. Well, perhaps if we hit this midway point, though, almost midway point, we'll get some growth for Jordan, because he was not stellar this episode. I mean, granted, I did like him going to go save his father, but like that whole I beat the robot in the Fortress of Solitude once, and I can do whatever I want to do now. Or like I beat it several times, and now he's mad because he got shot with lasers. I was like, he's like, would you let up? I was like, villains are not going to let up. That is exactly what Clark is saying. Could he be nicer about it? Sure, but villains are not nice. Like I just don't. That whole interaction. Like if you need a break, say you need a break. But to be like, why do you keep doing that? I was like, because you could die. You could die in the field if he's not there and he can't help you, and you're complaining because you keep getting shot by lasers. I was like, I really don't like. For instance, if you go up against Bruno Mannheim, you're not going to care that you're a kid if you're in his way. He could very much kill you.
Yeah, I feel like the thing I love the most about the storyline is how it kind of made you see both sides of the story. There's that meme that goes around from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier where the Falcon says he's out of line, but he's right. I feel like this can be applied to that situation. Clark was maybe pushing it a little too far, and Lois needed to talk him down, and that's exactly what she did. And he learned his lesson. However, that doesn't mean that Jordan doesn't need to learn a lesson. And we saw in the end, he was vulnerable, he was attacked, and he nearly died. So Clark wasn't wrong either. So this isn't just a one dimensional thing where you saw it all play out and Clark had to go and apologize and all that's it forever. Clark wasn't wrong. He wasn't necessarily right in the way he was behaving, but he wasn't wrong. And I feel like we're still going to keep seeing Jordan. He needs to learn. He's not ready to be a full-time hero yet. And I'm glad the show didn't just cram that plot into 40 minutes and have Jordan be Superboy from next week onwards.
These kids, man. These kids.
I know. Just like Sarah didn't learn the lesson, it doesn't seem like, neither did Jordan.
Them two are perfect for each other.
Because all Jordan was excited about was that like he apparently is not affected by kryptonite like his dad is. And I was like, do you only need to be shot once with it? They still could have killed you. All she would need is a knife. I just don't understand why we're like, yeah, I don't know. It's not the same weakness. I was like, it's not, but you can still die by pointy things or bullets. Like death by sharp objects is still an option for you. So I just don't, I don't know. But, I guess I'll let him have it. He can have the win.
Oh, him and Sarah, I feel, are going to keep riding her last nerves until the end of the season.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think... I think that's it for Superman and Lois. I mean, there's the Chrissy and Kyle stuff, which we touched on a little bit. I guess we'll see how well or unwell that plays out. I feel like she's going to get hurt. She said she didn't want to be a side piece. And I was like, he's divorced, so it's not a side piece. You should have asked about being a rebound.
Yeah, that's the word.
Because he's like, you're not. I was like, yeah, by definition, she's not. So I don't know what she meant by that.
And then he even said to her, I never thought I'd find someone so soon. And I was like, is this not potentially an issue here because it's been so soon? So I feel like they've set up Lana finding out maybe being the big obstacle here, but who knows? Maybe as they go on, they'll find out that maybe it was too soon for him. Who knows? But I'm glad that's out in the open now because at least it shifts things up. They kind of were playing with it for a long time.
Mm-hmm. But that Quick Mart has so much, like the girl who's always the cashier, she must have all the tea. Because she was there when Clark was getting the pregnancy test, and she's there to see Kyle and Lana and Chrissy blow up. So it's just gonna be interesting.